Please welcome to the stage Matthew Homenick.
Thank you. I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot of this luxury gym with impeccable landscaping in a wealthy New Jersey suburb. And I'm watching the sprinklers water mostly the parking lot. This is the kind of gym that you join when you want people to know that you're better than them. And I hadn't slept at all the night before, and I got to that gym early because I wanted to be anywhere but my home. The sun was just starting to come up when I got an email from my ex-fiance's father. And I read this email, and I shook my head, and I headed into the gym. Now, I joined this gym because I'd just been through a breakup, and one of my buddies told me that, well, there were a lot of hot girls in the yoga class. So yoga is very physically demanding, but I'd argue that it's actually more mentally taxing because you got to control your thoughts the whole time. And I had a rough couple of days, and controlling my thoughts was going to be a war. I was the first person in this yoga class, so I took the spot right in front of where the instructor was going to set up because I figured like that was the least creepy place to set up. And the studio was warm, and it smelled the lavender, and there was Enya playing softly. And as this class starts to fill up, there's a couple cougars, there's some younger girls, which is a good mix for me because I'm newly single and I don't even know what I like. And the instructor comes over to me, and in this mystical voice, she asks me for my name, asks me if I've ever done yoga before, and asks me if there's any injuries that she should know about. And she's got curly blonde hair, and she's probably in her 50s, and she's weirdly strong. Like the kind of strong that make you think that she lived in the woods alone for a period of time. So this class gets underway, and we're flowing through our first vinyasa, and I'm in downward dog, and my mind drifts to the day before. I had to call the pastor that was going to perform the ceremony to tell him that the wedding was off. And he had been my preschool teacher, and he was so excited for this ceremony that he had come out of retirement for it. So I called him, and I said, "Hey, Pastor, I know you came out of retirement for this, but the wedding's off." And he came back at me hard, and he said, "Matt, there is nothing you can't work through." And I said, "Oh, yeah? She was cheating on me with 2 guys. Do you think we can work through that?" And he said, "Well, Matt, some things you just can't work through." So I'm going from Warrior 1 into Warrior 2, and I start thinking about a week before I had to make that call. I had been a groomsman in my buddy Jim's wedding, and she looked amazing that night. We danced and drank all night. Danced and drank too much, and I carried her off to bed. I got her out of that beautiful dress. I put her in her jams. I tucked her in. I got her some water. When it suddenly occurred to me that I had to take a shit. Like right now. So I grabbed my phone, but my phone was dead. So I grabbed her iPad and I run into the bathroom. Juventus had played Barcelona in the Champions League final earlier that day, and I was watching the highlights when a text comes in from her boss. Text from her boss at 2 a.m. was weird, but I trusted her. She was going to be my wife. We went to high school together, and years after high school, we ran into each other in a local bar and started dating. And people were genuinely surprised when they saw us together, but I didn't care what they thought. Her friends told her that she wasn't deserving of a guy like me, and I told her that she was, and she shouldn't listen to them, because I thought she was amazing. And there had been great times. But recently, there had been a few nights that she came home very late and told me that she was just out having too much fun with a girlfriend. And then another text comes in. and then another. 3 texts at 2 a.m. from her boss. It was out of the ordinary. So I opened them. And it was him telling her about how hard he was going to fuck her and where. With all these purple devil emojis. So I'm scrolling through these texts, sitting on the toilet, watching my life unravel. And the worst part is she's telling him about how much she can't stand me, how much she hates my friends, how much she dislikes this life that we created. And I find myself, and I'm holding a side plank with sweat pouring down my face, and I'm back in that hotel room. And I woke her up. I asked her if she could explain these texts. She couldn't. I took the ring from her, I grabbed my things, and I left. A few days later, we met to talk, and she told me that it had never gotten physical with that guy, but it had gotten physical with another guy. And she wanted me to know that she had no intentions of telling me or stopping. She asked me if I'd take her back. I said no. I hugged her and I wished her well and I said goodbye. I'm in tree pose. And I lose my next mind battle. And I start thinking about that email that her dad sent me. In it, he told me that I needed to put my ego to the side and do what is right. I hadn't slept in days, and the night before was no exception. And part of how I occupied myself was I did laundry. And I even did her laundry because I knew she was going to be out of clothes. Ego to the side, ego to the side. A couple hours ago, I was folding your daughter's underwear, and you got the nerve to tell me that I need to put my ego to the side? After some failed attempts at crow pose and headstands and actively ignoring these purple devil emojis that were seared into my eyelids, this class starts to mercifully come to an end. And the instructor directs us to lay on our side in the fetal position, and she's going to lead us in a prayer. And that's not for me. So I'm sitting on my butt, my hands are on my knees, listening to the instructor talk about intentions and mindfulness. And my mind goes off to my living room. This living room used to be full all the time with friends and family and have parties and celebrations. And it was now empty, except for the 2 folding chairs and the nightstand that I was using as a dining room table since she moved out. This room was so bare that my buddy Joey that I wrestled with in high school told me on the golf course while taking practice swings that I really needed to do something about my furniture situation because, man, it is depressing. I told him that I was aware it was depressing because I live there. And I'm sorry that my personal tragedy momentarily inconvenienced you. My ears pick up now on the instructor who's now speaking in another language. And I go back to that living room where just a couple days before I had a conversation with another high school wrestling teammate named Pete. Pete's a couple years older than me, and he's always been like a big brother to me. And he came over to check on me. And when I told him that I didn't know if I was going to be okay, I didn't know how I was going to get through this, he leaned over and he pointed at me and he said, "Matt, no one gives a fuck about you. And no one is going to give a fuck about you the way that you need to give a fuck about you." See, I'd gone to college, got a stable job, I saved money, I bought a house, I met a girl. I did everything that everyone told me that I was supposed to do. And in that moment, engaging my sit bones on a yoga mat, I realized that my life as I knew it was over. In this room full of scantily clad women in Lululemon, I couldn't have been any more alone. And I was the only one that could help me. And that scared the shit out of me. And I started crying. Audible, full body sobs. It was undeniable how loud I was crying. The instructor was forced to stop her international prayer and address it. And she comes over to me and with a hand on my violently shaking shoulder says, "Sometimes your practice can be so intense that it brings out these emotions in you. And I want to congratulate Matt on his practice today." So now I have a line of all the hot girls in the yoga class coming up and patting me on the back while I'm crying and congratulating me. So I waited for everyone to leave, and then I left, and I made sure to face the wall the whole way so that nobody else had to see me crying. And during that class, I had received a couple text messages from a court officer that I worked with named Kevin. Kevin could always make me laugh, and I felt like I needed to talk to somebody. And in that moment, I probably should have called someone else. But it was early, and I knew he was awake, so I called him. And I said, "Hey, man, I just cried in a yoga class. I don't know what's wrong with me." And he says, "You do yoga?" I said, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "Don't tell anyone." I hung up on him after he asked me if I have perfected the self-fellatio pose yet. I laughed a little, but I started crying again, so I got off the phone. But I got in my car, and I gripped the steering wheel, and I said, "How am I going to get through this day?" And I didn't have an answer. But I made it through that day. And then the next day when I woke up, I asked myself again, how am I going to get through this day? I didn't have an answer. But I made it through that day. I was lucky enough to have friends and family that supported me. But what's been really hard for people that love me to understand is that I don't get to go back to being that guy. That guy is gone. He died in that hotel room, sitting on a toilet, looking at an iPad. With a lot of hard work, therapy, setbacks, like crying in other public places. This situation changed from being something that happened to me into an opportunity that was given to me. 3 years later, I got married. And though I haven't stopped giving a fuck about myself, it feels amazing to have a partner, to be in love, to be able to give a fuck about someone else. Thank you.